So episode 27, Hug Your Enemies. And I came up with that title because I thought, man, how can we get the people to know exactly what we're talking about just from the title? And I thought, man, this is the perfect title because this is probably what outraged and what outraged the people that were against hugging enemies, right? And it also it also glorified God in the eyes of the saints that were watching it and going, man, that's the love of Christ right there. It looks so familiar to see. So when you see it in front of you being displayed, you're like, okay, that looks familiar right there. That's the love of Christ that we're supposed to show everyone. And so today's episode, we're going to be dealing with Botham Jean, Amber Geiger, the injustice that happened, and just everything that all of the reactions, all of the responses, dealing with the brother's message of forgiveness, mercy, and hope for faith towards Amber. Also, should the family forgive this murderer if they call themselves Christians? Should they forgive Amber? How about the mercy that the judge showed? That was crazy. She's in trouble for that. She gave the Bible to Amber. We're also going to touch on forgiving those who've done you wrong or an injustice. I just thought, man, some of us went and took communion this past Sunday with unforgiveness in our heart, still towards this situation. Some of us aren't planning on forgiving Amber right now. And hopefully by the end of this podcast, by the end of this episode, you'll have a better perspective towards forgiveness. Yeah. Even if you're still outraged by the injustice that happened, because we're not ignoring that.
And that happens.
And that still happens, right? And that will happen, sure.
Right.
So we're going to talk about the world's outrage and the sympathy from the world, right? Because there was some sympathy from the world, ones that weren't believer. But I also want to talk about the Christians' response, which surprised me the most, to see some of the bad responses from the Christians. Right. And I just thought, man, we cannot put color, emotions, or even political views over our character. The world needs to see Christ firstly and lastly. We need to let the light of Christ shine through our forgiveness towards people, even whenever we're done wrong.
Right.
How should Christians deal with injustice?
I think it's hard. First of all, it don't matter who you are, seeing injustice happening in our culture, but also like close up, with friends or family. I think that's when it gets more difficult. I noticed that when I've seen loved ones or friends, I remember a situation when I was a teenager. We had a situation happening downtown here in the city. A fight broke out. And
were you fighting?
Let's just say a fight broke out. And
so you were doing the injustice?
No.
Okay,
it was just
just
trying
to get a little context.
Right.
All right, go ahead. A fight broke out.
We were Hispanic. There was whites there, and then we got into it. You know what I'm saying? That was common back then. And then when the cops came, we got arrested.
Wow.
Face slammed to the wall. They let them go, actually, and then we got charged.
Wow.
So when it's up that close, it becomes more difficult because then, as a Christian, if that happened to me as a Christian, number one, I shouldn't have been fighting or anything like that. But no matter the case, if there's an injustice that happens, a lot of times, like, you're dealing with feelings and emotions that try to drive you to see people a certain way. And then painting a broad brush on people too. Like, it wouldn't have been right for me to paint white people with the broad brush at that point, as an example. So,
right, to put everybody just under one group. Like,
that's easy.
You're white, so all of y'all act the same.
Right. And that's easy to do, when it's up that close. And the other thing you have to guard against is, this right you have to hold on to how you feel, or people got to understand how I feel, what I went through. You have to be careful with that too. I think what Jesus lays out in the New Testament, really does put that on the table for examination, man. He had a way of really putting that into perspective. And we'll talk about this, but I think when it's up and close, it's a little different than seeing it in our culture, seeing it on a Facebook page, going on YouTube. It's like you can say, wow, that's crazy, and then keep it moving. But when it happens to you personally or to someone you love, it's a different thing.
Yeah.
So I would say guard how you feel, guard your perspective. You're always Christian, so always continue to be.
Yeah. No, that's good, man.
Yeah.
And so look, let's get into some of the, I guess you could say, some of the just facts of the case. You have Botham Jean, who was murdered by Amber Geiger, and the family was involved with it at this point because obviously Botham can't speak for himself. So they are the representatives of that side of it. And so I have a brief article right here that I wanted to read just for those of them, anyone out there that may not have all the facts or never even heard this situation. So former Dallas police officer Amber Geiger was sentenced on Wednesday to 10 years in prison for the fatal 2018 killing of an innocent man that she shot when she mistakenly entered into his apartment, believing that it was her own. But in a remarkable act of forgiveness, the brother of the victim took the witness stand and spoke directly to Geiger, saying, "I love you like anyone else," and later hugged her in the courtroom before she was led off to prison. The sentence appeared to initially disappoint the family of the victim, Botham Jean, who had hoped for a far harsher punishment for Geiger. Several members of the family broke down in tears, shaking their heads as if in disbelief of the jury's decision. But Jean's 18-year-old brother, Brant Jean, took the witness stand and spoke to Geiger, saying, "I know if you go to God and ask him, he will forgive you." Wow. "I love you just like anyone else, and I'm not going to hope you rot and die," Brant Jean told Geiger. "I personally want the best for you. I wasn't going to say this in front of my family. I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you because I know that's exactly what Botham would want for you. Give your life to Christ. I think giving your life to Christ is the best thing that Botham would want for you." Brant Jean then asked Kemp, which was the judge, if he could give Geiger a hug, a request the judge granted. He stepped off the witness stand and met Geiger in front of the judge's bench and embraced as Geiger broke into tears. Moments later, Kemp spoke to Geiger privately, this is the judge, and also hugged her and appeared to give her words of hope. She also handed her a Bible. Right. Jean's mother, Allison, this is the victim's mother, said at a post-sentencing news conference that while the death of her son changed my life and it changed my family's life, she will accept the jury's decision and try to move on. That 10 years in prison is for her, Geiger, Amber Geiger, to reflect and to change her life, Allison said. But there is much hope, much more to be done by the city of Dallas. The corruption that we saw during this trial must stop. The city of Dallas needs to clean up inside. The Dallas Police Department has a lot of laundry to do. The Texas Rangers need to get on board. She noted that the contamination of the crime scene after her son was killed and said the poor use of the training Geiger received as a police officer should never happen again. Botham's privacy was violated, she said. She intruded on him and that was not enough. She killed him. The victim's mother said, "If Amber Geiger was trained not to shoot in the heart, my son would be standing here today." Many supporters of the Jean family standing outside the courtroom said the sentence was like a slap in the face to the family and began chanting, "No justice, no peace." So I found a very short article compared to other articles out there, and I wanted to read that to you guys. That was from ABC News, and if you guys are looking for a citation on that, I got you. But yeah, that right there was, in a nutshell, what we'll be discussing today, at least the content of it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Because I asked Kurt Kennedy what he think about it. What do you think about this?
About the family's reaction?
Yeah, I guess you could just what I just read, like just
right.
Everything, I guess. Do you think,
like I said,
it was reasonable, the sentencing?
Yeah, I think when it's that up and close, again, the family, the feelings and the emotions and not having him there anymore, that's different than us watching on TV. What's sad to me is how people react online and on social media towards it. They call themselves Christian, and they're outraged by it, which to some extent I kind of understand people's concern, but yeah, I think when it's up and close like that, I understand. I don't understand how people can act as if they're the actual family in that situation and lose their reason in the process, especially Christians. You know what I mean? Yeah. So some of the reactions that I've seen Christians have that seem, confusing to me because of what Jesus says to do in a situation like that. Yeah, it's a confusing picture for me. I don't get it.
Yeah, that's tough, man.
Yeah,
because the cold hard facts is this, and I wanted to go through some cold hard facts right here. She said she only noticed Gene's TV was on after she got to his body, right? That's when she noticed the TV was on, after she got to his body. The prosecution has contended that Geiger should have been able to see Gene in the apartment from the bright TV rays emitting light. So she should have been able to see him. Geiger said she was trying to keep Gene alive. She said, I wanted to keep him breathing, and then added at that point, Gene was a little conscious. After the 911 was played aloud, Geiger revealed what was going through her mind. She said, I shot an innocent man. That's what was going through her mind. On the accusations that she was more concerned with herself than trying to save Gene's life, Geiger testified why she said she texted, because she was texting during this situation.
Right.
She was texting someone who she was having an affair with. She was having an affair with a married man, and she was texting him while this was going on. Like, she texted him before she went in the house, apparently. That's why she was distracted and shot him. And then while Gene is laying there dying, she texts the guy that she's having an affair with, like, yo, I messed up, for lack of better words. I messed up. So she's texting him while this is going on, and people are saying, if you cared so much about Gene's life after you realized it, that you shot him wrongfully, why didn't you at least administer CPR the right way instead of over there texting? And so people are upset, like, she's being caught in what it seems like lies, or at least inconsistencies in her story.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to check into the, like, how remorseful she seems or anything like that, or get statements on her saying. The only statement I really got from her was really saying, I killed him. It's my fault that he's dead. I wish that it was him. I wish that I was dead rather than him. Right? So there's people saying that it was just pretty much her trying to get pity from people so that her sentencing isn't so harsh.
Right.
And so I guess my big question out of all of this, because I can go through more.
And it's important to know we don't know.
Yeah. I can go through more, but these are things that we might never know, right?
Right.
But my question is, like, what do you do whenever someone, let's just say she's not even really realizing how wrong she is in this situation? How obligated are we as Christians to forgiving her, even if she's not repentant? You should, for this.
I don't. So forgiving someone's not dependent on anyone and their reaction or their being remorseful or sorrowful. That's not the case.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it really goes back to how we've been forgiven. You know, we talked about this at the men's group tonight. The way Jesus taught forgiveness leaves it on the person forgiving, not the person who's being forgiven. You know, for us, for one another, you have a responsibility as a Christian to forgive, because then your Heavenly Father won't forgive you of your debts. You know, so like, that's really the issue, and that's hard to say to some folks. Some folks might find that offensive, but a lot of things Jesus said were offensive. And I think it's because his eyes weren't on weren't on the temporal. Yeah. So when you have an eternal perspective, you can say these things because you have eternity in mind, you have God in mind, and this life is not the only life.
Right.
There's a life to come. And so they're hard sayings for people, but it's for people that might be that aren't able to see the gospel for what it actually is, you know?
Yeah.
And that might sound insensitive to some people, but if you really understood the gospel, man, or remembered it, because I think some Christians forget, we can forgive. And I like what Kurt says. It's not forgiving is a decision you make, not necessarily how you feel. It's a process. You know, I've said that as a pastor to some folks who were in situations where, you know, adultery happened or whatever. We never told someone you need to forgive. We told people it's a process. You know, it's going to take time. You're going to grieve. You're going to go through days where you don't feel like you need to forgive or whatever. That's part of the process. But we're always called to make that decision to say, I forgive you. You know? So forgiveness doesn't mean it has to look pretty.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the person literally could spit in your face at the thought of asking your forgiveness, and you still are obligated to forgive because of the love that was shown to you by Christ.
Yeah.
He forgave us while we were still sinners.
He was
while we were still unrepentant.
That's why Jesus just, you know, he
set the bar at a whole nother level.
Yeah, he shuts all the critics down.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because while he was forgiving and working to justify, to make us righteous, he was being spit on, beat, bruised, unjustly, you know, without sin. And yet he hung on the cross and said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. For me, it's a wrap, man.
Yeah.
So as a Christian, I think that's the standard, and we don't have an excuse at all, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
That's so I can hear some people angry right now. I can see people angry or offended.
Sure, right, because we're dealing with three things right here. We're dealing with an injustice issue. This is human versus human. We're dealing with police brutality issue. Again. This isn't the first time either. Right. This is citizen versus authority, right? And then we're dealing with a racial issue, right? Because people are always going to look at the race when it comes to this.
Yeah.
No matter if it had something to do with it or not, which I read enough of her past tweets to know that she actually said she was a racist. She already admitted to it. So these are things that I wanted to look into before we went live. Because I'm like, well, is it a racial issue? She said she's a racist. So they got past tweets. You know, in this cancel culture that we live in, they look through all that and they pulled that stuff out. She was posting on Pinterest these type of things. And she was thrown off, man. She really was thrown off just looking at some of the things that she was posting. She was boasting that she was thrown off. She's like, I don't understand why people, I remember one of her posts said, I don't understand why people aren't just thankful. Like pretty much saying they should be thankful to me. And then she's like, they should be thankful that I don't kill them all. Like this is obviously a joke that she shared through the meme, but there's truth in every joke, man. Right. So we're dealing with the injustice issue, police brutality issue, and a racial issue. So people are going to be outraged. People are going to be mad. They're going to be pissed off. They're going to be really challenged. This is a challenge to forgive.
Yeah.